The escape pod drifted through the cold darkness of space. Inside, a young woman floated in the small cabin. Her name was Mira Okonkwo. She was 23 years old. Blood floated in tiny drops around her head from a wound on her forehead. Her eyes were closed, but she was not dead. Not yet. 3 hours ago, she had been a combat engineer on the UNS Perseverance. It was a good ship with a good crew. 4,000 people lived and worked on that ship. They were her family. They were all she had left after Earth became too small for her dreams. Then the Zyrathi came. The attack lasted only 15 minutes. The alien warships appeared from nowhere and opened fire without warning. The Perseverance never had a chance. Mira remembered the screams. She remembered the fire. She remembered running through broken hallways as the ship died around her. She found an escape pod and threw herself inside just before the final explosion tore the Perseverance apart. Now she drifted alone in the endless black. The only human left alive in this part of the galaxy. The Zyrathi found her 2 hours later. Their ship was massive and dark. It looked like a mountain made of black metal and sharp edges. The name of this ship was the Throne of Ashes, and it was the flagship of the Zyrathi Dominion, the most powerful warship in 3-star systems. A tractor beam grabbed Mira's tiny pod and pulled it inside. When the pod doors opened, Mira saw them for the first time. The Zyrathi were tall and thin. Their skin was gray like stone. They had 4 arms and faces that showed no emotion. Their eyes were black and empty like the space between stars. 2 soldiers grabbed her arms and dragged her out of the pod. Mira tried to fight, but she was weak from blood loss and lack of air. They pulled her through long metal hallways until they reached a large room filled with Zyrathi warriors. At the center of the room sat Commander Vethkoran. He was larger than the others. His gray skin was covered with old scars from many battles. Golden marks on his face showed his high rank. He looked at Mira the way a person might look at an insect. "A human," he said. His voice was deep and cold. "How interesting." The soldiers threw Mira to the floor in front of him. She landed hard on her hands and knees. Pain shot through her body, but she did not cry out. She would not give them that satisfaction. "The ship we destroyed," Vethkoran continued. "It was yours?" Mira looked up at him. Her brown eyes burned with hate. "You killed 4,000 people." "Yes," Vethkoran said simply. "They were in our space. They died for their mistake. They were explorers, scientists, families." Mira's voice shook with anger. "They were not soldiers." Vethkoran made a sound that might have been a laugh. "It does not matter what they were. They were human. Humans are weak. Humans are small. Humans are nothing." He stood up from his chair and walked toward her. His 4 arms hung at his sides. Each hand could crush her skull without effort. "Kneel," he commanded. Mira stared at him. Then, slowly, she pushed herself up from the floor. Her legs shook. Her head pounded with pain. But she stood. She stood straight and tall and looked directly into his black eyes. "No," she said. The room went silent. Every Zyrathi warrior stared at her in shock. No one said no to Commander Vethkoran. No one. Vethkoran's empty face showed something new. It might have been surprise. It might have been anger. Then he nodded to his soldiers. They beat her. The first blow came from behind and knocked her to the ground. Then they kicked her. They hit her with their fists. They used metal rods. Mira felt her ribs crack. She felt her arm break. Blood filled her mouth and spilled onto the cold metal floor. But she did not scream. She did not beg. She bit her lip until it bled and stayed silent through all of it. When they finally stopped, Mira lay broken on the floor. She could barely see through the blood in her eyes. Every breath was agony. But somewhere deep inside her, a fire still burned. It was not hope. Hope had died with the Perseverance. This was something older, something darker. It was hate. Vethkoran stood over her and looked down. For a moment, something flickered in his black eyes. Not respect. The Zyrathi did not respect humans, but perhaps a small recognition that this creature was not exactly what he expected. He dismissed the thought immediately. "She is not worth killing," he announced to his warriors. "She is not worth keeping as a slave. She is nothing." He turned to his lieutenant. "Take her to Vyrath 9. Leave her on the surface. We will collect her body in 3 days for my trophy hall." Vyrath 9. Even Mira had heard of that place. A frozen hell world on the edge of Zyrathi space. The surface temperature was cold enough to freeze blood in seconds. The air was thin and poisonous. Giant predators roamed the ice, hunting anything that moved. No one survived on Vireth 9. That was the point. The soldiers dragged Mira's broken body to a small transport ship. They did not bother to treat her wounds or give her warm clothing. Why waste resources on a dead woman? The flight to Vireth 9 took 4 hours. Mira drifted in and out of consciousness. She dreamed of her ship. She dreamed of her friends. She dreamed of fire and screaming and the endless cold of space. When the transport reached the planet, they did not land. They simply opened the cargo door and pushed her out. Mira fell. The wind tore at her body as she dropped through the thin atmosphere. Below her, a vast white landscape stretched to the horizon. Ice and snow and nothing else. A frozen grave waiting to receive her. She hit the ground hard. The snow cushioned her fall slightly, but she still felt bones shift inside her. For a long moment, she just lay there, staring up at the gray sky. The cold began to seep into her immediately. It was worse than anything she had ever felt. It was like being stabbed by 1,000 tiny knives all at once. Above her, the transport ship rose back into the sky. On its bridge, a Zyrathi soldier looked down at the tiny dark spot on the white snow. In a few hours, that spot would be gone. The cold would take her. The predators would eat what remained. One more human dead. One more planet cleansed. The ship flew back toward the throne of ashes. On the flagship, Commander Vethkorin had already forgotten about the human girl. He had more important things to consider. Battles to plan. Enemies to crush. The Zyrathi dominion was expanding, and nothing could stop them. Certainly not the weak and pathetic humans. He returned to his command chair and looked out at the stars. Far below, on the frozen surface of Vireth 9, Mira Okonkwo lay dying in the snow. Her body was broken. Her blood was freezing. Every logical part of her brain told her that this was the end. She should close her eyes and let the cold take her. It would be peaceful. It would be easy. But Mira had never been good at doing the easy thing. She thought about Vethkorin's face. She thought about his words. Humans are weak. Humans are small. Humans are nothing. Something inside her chest began to burn. Not warmth from her failing body. Something else. Something that had no right to exist in this frozen wasteland. It was rage. Pure, absolute, undying rage. Mira opened her eyes. She looked at the gray sky above her, and she made a promise. Not to God, not to herself, to the universe itself. She was going to live. She was going to find Vethkorin, and she was going to make him understand exactly what humans were capable of when you took everything from them. Slowly, painfully, Mira began to crawl. Mira crawled through the snow. Every movement sent waves of pain through her broken body. Her fingers had turned blue, then purple, then black at the tips. Ice crystals formed on her eyelashes and made it hard to see. The cold was a living thing, reaching inside her and squeezing the life from her organs one by one. She should have been dead already. The human body was not designed for this kind of cold. Her heart should have stopped. Her brain should have shut down. Every medical textbook in the galaxy said she should be a frozen corpse by now. But Mira kept crawling. The Zyrathi had studied humans for decades. They knew about human biology. They knew about human technology. They knew about human history and culture and psychology. They had files and reports and scientific papers about every aspect of human existence. But they had missed something important. Something that did not show up in medical scans or psychological profiles. Something that humans themselves did not fully understand. Spite. When a human decided to survive out of pure stubborn hate, the rules of biology became more like suggestions. The body found reserves of energy that should not exist. The mind pushed past barriers that should be unbreakable. Death itself had to wait while the human finished being angry. Mira was very, very angry. She crawled for 2 hours. Her trail through the snow was marked with frozen drops of blood. Twice she stopped moving entirely, and twice she forced herself to start again. The cold screamed at her to give up. Her body begged her to rest. She ignored them both. Then she saw the cave. It was a dark opening in a wall of ice ahead of her. Not large, but big enough to provide shelter from the wind. Mira changed direction and crawled toward it. Every meter felt like a kilometer. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, she reached the entrance and pulled herself inside. The cave went deeper than she expected. The walls were not natural ice but smooth metal covered in frost. This was not a cave. It was a tunnel. Something built by intelligent hands a very long time ago. Mira kept moving. She had no choice. The cold would kill her if she stopped. She crawled through the metal tunnel until it opened into a larger space. She found herself in an ancient Xyrathi military bunker. The place was huge. Rows of metal containers lined the walls. Strange machines stood silent and covered in ice. Everything was old and abandoned, forgotten by the Xyrathi centuries ago. But it was shelter, real shelter, with walls that blocked the wind and a ceiling that held in whatever tiny warmth her body could produce. Mira collapsed on the floor and let herself rest for the first time in hours. She did not sleep. Sleeping in this cold would mean death. Instead, she lay still and let her mind work through the pain. She needed to think. She needed a plan. First, she needed warmth. Mira forced herself to move again. She searched through the containers and found old Xyrathi military supplies. Ration packs that were probably centuries old but sealed tight against decay. Thermal blankets designed for their gray-skinned bodies. Medical supplies that she did not recognize but might be useful. She wrapped herself in the thermal blankets. She ate some of the ration paste, which tasted like chemicals and sadness but gave her body something to burn. Slowly, very slowly, she began to warm up. Her fingers would never be the same. 3 of them were dead already, frozen beyond recovery. Her arm was broken in 2 places. Her ribs were cracked, but she was alive. Against all odds, against all logic, she was alive. The bunker was larger than she first thought. Mira spent the next several hours exploring its frozen halls. She found weapons caches filled with old Xyrathi guns and blades. She found communication equipment that might still work. She found armor that was too big for her human frame but could be modified. And then she found the stasis pods. There were 20 of them, standing in a row in the deepest part of the bunker. Each pod was made of dark metal and covered in frost. Through the small windows, Mira could see shapes inside. Large shapes, living shapes. She wiped the frost from one window and looked inside. The creature was enormous. It looked like a wolf, but wrong in every way. Its body was covered in thick, white fur. Its mouth was filled with teeth, as long as her fingers. Its claws could tear through metal like paper. Even in stasis, even frozen and sleeping, it radiated power and danger. A control panel next to the pod still glowed with faint light. Mira read the Xyrathi text slowly, translating with the basic language skills she had learned during her time in space. These creatures were called Corveth. The Xyrathi had created them through genetic engineering hundreds of years ago. They were war beasts, designed to fight alongside Xyrathi soldiers. But something had gone wrong. The Corveth became too savage, too wild, too dangerous even for their creators. They could not be controlled. So the Xyrathi abandoned them here on Vyrath 9 and forgot about them. Mira read more. The Corveth had one interesting feature. They were designed to bond with a leader through combat. If someone could defeat a Corveth in battle and survive, the creature would follow that person forever. Complete loyalty, until death. This was how the Xyrathi had planned to control them. Their strongest warriors would bond with the beasts and lead them into battle. But no Xyrathi warrior had ever been strong enough to win the bonding fight. The Corveth killed every one of them. Mira looked at the sleeping monsters. Then she looked at her broken body. Then she started to laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had nothing left to lose. She spent the next 2 hours preparing. She set her broken arm using supplies from the medical kit. She wrapped her ribs tight to keep them stable. She found a long metal rod that could serve as a weapon and sharpened one end against the frozen wall. Then she opened the first stasis pod. The Corveth woke up angry. It burst from the pod in an explosion of ice and fury, its yellow eyes immediately finding the small human standing before it. It roared, a sound so loud that ice fell from the ceiling. Then it attacked. What happened next was not a fight. It was survival through pure refusal to die. The Corveth was faster than anything Mira had ever seen. Its claws ripped through her shoulder before she could react. She fell back. Blood sprang across the frozen floor. The beast came for her again, mouth open wide, ready to bite her in half. Mira moved. She did not think about her broken bones. She did not think about her frozen fingers. She thought only about Vethkoran's face. She thought about his words. She thought about the 4,000 people who died on the Perseverance. She jammed her metal rod into the Corveth's eye. The creature screamed and thrashed. Mira held on. She climbed onto its back as it tried to shake her off. She pulled the rod free and stabbed again, aiming for the base of the skull. The corvette threw itself against the walls, trying to crush her. She felt more ribs crack. She did not let go. The fight lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, Mira lay on the floor next to the dead beast. Her body was destroyed. She had wounds on top of wounds. Blood pooled beneath her in a spreading circle of red, but she was alive. And the corvette was dead. Then she heard the sound. A low growl from the shadows. Mira turned her head and saw them. The other stasis pods had opened during the fight. 17 corvettes stood in a half-circle around her, their yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. They had watched her kill their alpha. They had seen what she could do. Mira tried to raise her weapon, but her arm would not move. She was too broken, too empty, too close to death. If they attacked now, she would die. There was nothing she could do to stop them. The largest corvette stepped forward. It was even bigger than the one she had killed. It walked slowly toward her, its massive paws leaving prints in her blood. It stopped inches from her face and looked into her eyes. Mira looked back. She did not beg. She did not show fear. She was too tired and too angry for fear. The corvette lowered its head to the ground. One by one, the others did the same. 17 monsters, bred for war and death, kneeling before a broken human girl who refused to die. Mira had found her army. Mira spent the next several hours learning about her new companions. The corvette were not mindless beasts. They were intelligent, able to understand commands and work together as a unit. The bond she had formed with them went beyond simple obedience. She could feel them in the back of her mind, a constant presence of loyalty and controlled violence. She named the largest one Ghost, because its white fur made it nearly invisible in the snow. The others she named after storms and weapons and things that destroyed: Thunder, Blade, Fury, Ruin. Names that matched what they were and what they would become. The bunker had everything she needed to prepare. The old Zyrathi armor was too large for her body, but she used tools from the weapons cache to cut it down to her size. She modified it to fit her movements, to cover her vital organs, to let her ride on the back of a corvette without falling off. It was ugly work, but it was functional. She treated her wounds as best she could. Her body was a map of damage now. Cuts and bruises and broken bones held together by bandages and stubborn will. She had lost 3 fingers to the cold and 2 teeth to the corvette fight. None of that mattered. She could still move. She could still fight. That was enough. While she worked, she studied the communication equipment in the bunker. Most of it was dead, but one terminal still functioned. Through it, she could access the Zyrathi military network. The security was ancient and easy to bypass. Within an hour, she was reading classified files about Zyrathi operations across the sector. She learned that there was an outpost on the other side of the planet, a small base with 50 Zyrathi soldiers, used as a monitoring station for the prison world. They tracked what ships came and went. They recorded the deaths of the prisoners dumped here. They made sure no one ever escaped. She also learned that the Throne of Ashes was still in orbit. Veth Korin had not left yet. He was waiting, probably to collect her corpse as promised. 3 days, he had said. She had used almost one of those days already. Mira smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. She gathered her corvette pack and left the bunker. The storm had died down outside, and the pale sun of Vyrath 9 cast weak light across the frozen landscape. Mira climbed onto Ghost's back and pointed toward the southern horizon. They ran. The corvette moved faster than any machine. They flowed across the ice like water, their powerful legs eating up the distance. Mira held tight to Ghost's fur and felt the wind cut at her face. For the first time since the Perseverance died, she felt something other than pain and hate. She felt power. They reached the outpost in 4 hours. It was built into the side of a mountain, with thick metal walls and gun towers at each corner. Heat signatures glowed from inside, showing the Zyrathi going about their daily routines. They had no idea what was coming for them. Mira studied the base from a ridge overlooking it. She counted the guards, mapped the patrol routes, identified the weak points in their defenses. She had been a combat engineer on the Perseverance. She knew how to break things. The attack began at sunset. Garrison Commander Yethral was eating his evening meal when the alarms started screaming. He dropped his food and ran to the observation deck, his 4 arms grabbing weapons as he moved. Around him, soldiers scrambled to battle positions. The outpost had never been attacked before. This planet was supposed to be a frozen grave, not a battlefield. Yethral reached the observation window and looked outside. He saw the Corvith coming. 17 massive white shapes flowed across the snow toward his base. They moved in perfect formation, spreading out to approach from multiple angles at once. This was impossible. Corvith were wild animals. They did not coordinate. They did not plan. They simply killed anything they found. Then he saw the rider. A small figure sat on the back of the largest Corvith. It wore modified Zarathi armor and held a blade in one hand. As Yethral watched, the figure raised the blade and pointed it directly at the main gate. The Corvith attacked. The first wave hit the eastern gun tower. 3 beasts climbed the wall like it was flat ground and tore through the metal with their claws. The Zarathi inside fired their weapons. But the Corvith were too fast, too savage. Within seconds, the tower fell silent. At the same time, more Corvith struck the western defenses. They came from the shadows, silent and deadly, ripping through guards before anyone could raise an alarm. Screams echoed across the frozen air. Mira guided Ghost to the main gate. The guards there had formed a defensive line, their weapons trained on the approaching beast. They fired in unison. But Ghost was already moving, dodging left with supernatural speed. Mira leaped from its back and rolled beneath the gunfire. She came up inside their formation. The Zarathi were taller and stronger than her. Their forearms gave them advantages in close combat. Under normal circumstances, one of them could kill a human easily. But these were not normal circumstances. Mira fought like something that had already died and come back angry. She moved through them with her stolen blade, cutting tendons and slicing throats. When they grabbed her, she broke their grips with techniques she had learned in military training. When they hit her, she took the blow and kept fighting. She could not beat them with strength, so she beat them with speed and skill, and absolute commitment to violence. Ghost rejoined the fight, tearing through soldiers who tried to flank Mira. Together, human and beast carved a path of destruction through the outpost's defenders. The battle lasted 90 minutes. When it ended, the outpost was silent. 50 Zarathi soldiers lay dead in the snow and hallways. Mira stood in the command center, breathing hard, covered in blood that was mostly not her own. She had won. But this was not the end. This was just the beginning. Mira accessed the command center's communication systems. They were much more advanced than the equipment in the bunker. Through them, she could reach any ship in orbit. She could reach the Throne of Ashes. She could reach Vethkorin. She opened a channel and waited. Vethkorin's face appeared on the screen. He looked annoyed at the interruption. His black eyes narrowed with irritation. Then he saw who was calling him. His face went through several expressions very quickly. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, and then, something that Mira had never expected to see on a Zarathi face, fear. It was only there for a moment. He hid it quickly behind his usual mask of cold arrogance. But Mira had seen it. She would remember it forever. Human, Vethkorin said. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the tension beneath it. You should be dead. Yes, Mira agreed. I should be. I'm not. How did you survive? The cold alone should have killed you in minutes. Mira smiled her bloody smile. You studied us, Commander. You read reports about human biology and psychology, but you missed something important. She leaned closer to the screen. You missed what happens when you take everything from us. You missed what we become when we have nothing left to lose. Vethkorin's eyes moved, looking at something off-screen. He was checking sensor data, Mira realized, learning what had happened to his outpost. His expression grew darker with each passing second. 50 soldiers, he said quietly. You killed 50 soldiers, with the help of some friends I found in your old bunkers. Mira whistled softly, and Ghost walked into the frame behind her. The massive Corveth looked directly at the screen and growled. Your ancestors made these beautiful creatures. Thank you for leaving them for me to find. The Corveth cannot be controlled, Vethkorin said. Our greatest warriors tried and failed. Your greatest warriors were not angry enough. Mira reached up and scratched Ghost behind the ear. The beast closed its eyes in pleasure. I am. Silence stretched between them. Vethkorin stared at her, calculating, reassessing. She was not the weak human he had dismissed so easily. She was something else now, something dangerous. What do you want? He finally asked. Mira leaned back in her chair. Behind her, The bodies of his soldiers lay where they had fallen. The command center screens showed flames and destruction throughout the base. I want you to know something, Commander. 24 hours ago, you left me to die on a frozen rock. You thought I was nothing. You thought humans were prey. She paused, letting the words sink in. I'm coming for your throne, and when I get there, I'm going to show you exactly what nothing can do. She pressed a button, and the footage from the battle began transmitting to every ship in the Zyrathi fleet. Every captain, every soldier, every officer would see what one human girl had done to an entire outpost. Then she cut the feed. The game had begun. Vethkorin did not wait long to respond. Within 2 hours of Mira's transmission, Zyrathi troopships began descending through the atmosphere of Vyrath 9, 2,000 soldiers. The largest ground force deployed in decades, tanks and walkers and air support vehicles. Enough firepower to conquer a small planet, all of it coming for one human girl. Mira watched the ships descend from a mountain peak near the destroyed outpost. Ghost lay beside her, its massive body warm against the cold wind. The other Corvith were scattered around the mountain, hidden in the snow, waiting for her command. 17 beasts against 2,000 soldiers. The numbers were not good, but Mira had learned something important from the outpost database before she destroyed it. She had learned that she was not alone on Vyrath 9. The Zyrathi had been using this planet as a dumping ground for centuries, not just for prisoners condemned to die, but for entire species they had conquered and enslaved. When those slaves became too old or too sick or too rebellious to work, they were sent here. Most died quickly in the cold. But some survived. They found caves and tunnels and places to hide. They built communities in the darkness beneath the ice. Mira had found their locations in the outpost files. Now she needed to find them in person. She rode Ghost down from the mountain and into the frozen valleys below. The Zyrathi landing force was still organizing itself, setting up command posts and patrol routes. They expected their enemy to hide and wait. They did not expect her to move toward something else entirely. The first settlement was buried beneath a glacier. Mira found the entrance hidden behind a wall of ice and squeezed through into the darkness beyond. Ghost was too large to follow, so she went alone, carrying only a small light and her blade. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern filled with strange structures, buildings made of ice and salvaged metal, lights glowing from small fires and stolen technology, and everywhere, the people who lived here. They called themselves the Vrethki. Their skin was blue and covered in tiny scales. They had large dark eyes that reflected Mira's light like mirrors. Once, they had been a proud species of engineers and builders. The Zyrathi had conquered their homeworld 300 years ago and forced them into slavery. Those who could not work were sent here to die, but the Vrethki were survivors. They had built this hidden city beneath the ice. They had maintained their knowledge and their culture. They were broken in body but not in spirit. When Mira walked into their settlement, they surrounded her with weapons raised. She was wearing Zyrathi armor. They had every reason to attack first and ask questions later. I am not your enemy, Mira said, raising her empty hands. I am like you, a prisoner, a survivor, and I need your help. An old Vrethki pushed through the crowd. His scales were dull with age, and one of his eyes was blind, but he moved with the authority of a leader. You are human, he said. His voice was rough but intelligent. We have heard of your kind. Small, weak, young to the stars. Yes, Mira agreed. And yet here I am. I killed 50 Zyrathi soldiers last night. Alone. Except for the Corvith who follow me. I sent a message to their commander telling him I was coming for his throne. She smiled, her broken smile. Does that sound weak to you? The old Vrethki studied her for a long moment. Then he made a sound that might have been laughter. No, he admitted. It sounds insane. What do you want from us? I want you to remember who you were before they took everything. I want you to fight. I want you to help me make them afraid. Silence filled the cavern. The Vrethki looked at each other with expressions Mira could not read. 300 years of slavery had taught them to be careful. Hope was dangerous. Rebellion meant death, but so did surrender. So did hiding in caves while the universe forgot they existed. The old Vrethki turned to his people and spoke in their own language. Mira did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. It was a call to arms, a reminder of what they had lost, a question about what they were willing to do to get it back. When he finished, the Vrethki began to cheer. Mira found 2 more settlements that day. The On, a species of towering warriors whose planet had burned centuries ago. The Skeleth, small telepaths who had been surgically altered to prevent them from using their powers. Both groups had survived on Vireth 9 through stubbornness and luck. Both groups had given up hope of ever being free. Mira gave them something new to believe in. Not hope. Hope was too gentle for what she offered. She gave them purpose. She gave them hate. She gave them permission to fight back against the monsters who had destroyed their worlds. By hour 18, Mira had assembled an army of her own. The Vrethki worked through the night, repairing and modifying the weapons from the old bunker. They built traps and defensive positions. They created communication devices that could reach across the planet. Their engineering skills had survived 3 centuries of slavery, waiting for a chance to be used again. The On trained with the Corveth. They were nearly as large as the beasts themselves, and their forearms made them deadly in close combat. They learned to fight alongside Ghost and the others, coordinating their attacks for maximum damage. The Skeleth were the most valuable of all. Without their suppressors, their telepathic abilities were slowly returning. They could not read minds yet, but they could sense emotions and intentions. More importantly, they could share those senses with others. Mira's army would know where the enemy was before the enemy knew themselves. When the Zyrathi invasion force finally advanced on the destroyed outpost, they found nothing. No human girl, no Corveth, just empty buildings and frozen bodies. They spread out to search the surrounding area. That was when the killing began. The first patrol vanished without a sound. 20 soldiers walked into a narrow valley and never walked out. Their bodies were found an hour later, torn apart by claws and blades. No one had heard them scream. No one had seen anything. The second patrol triggered a trap. Explosives hidden beneath the ice erupted when they passed, throwing bodies into the air. Before the survivors could recover, Corveth burst from the snow and fell upon them. The battle lasted less than a minute. The third patrol was hit by the On. The giant warriors emerged from hidden tunnels and attacked with a fury that shocked the Zyrathi. These were supposed to be broken slaves, defeated and helpless. Instead, they fought like demons, their forearms swinging massive weapons with devastating effect. All across the frozen landscape, the invasion force began to die. The Zyrathi commanders did not understand what was happening. Their sensors could not detect the enemy. Their communications were jammed by Vrethki technology. Their soldiers reported attacks from every direction, by enemies who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. And always, at the center of the chaos, there was the human. Mira led her forces from Ghost's back, coordinating attacks through the Skeleth network. She struck weak points and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. She let the Zyrathi see her just often enough to draw them into traps. She was everywhere and nowhere, a nightmare that would not end. By hour 20, more than half the invasion force was dead. The survivors pulled back to a defensive position, calling desperately for support from orbit. But the Throne of Ashes could not help them. Orbital bombardment would kill their own troops along with the enemy. Reinforcements would take hours to prepare. Vethkorin watched the battle reports from his command chair and felt something cold settle in his chest. This was not how war was supposed to work. The Zyrathi were the conquerors. They were the strong ones. They did not lose to slaves and animals and single human girls. But the numbers did not lie. His soldiers were dying. His invasion was failing. And somewhere on that frozen planet, a dead woman was laughing at him. He gave the order to prepare the flagship's weapons. If he could not take the planet, he would destroy it, glass the entire hemisphere, kill everyone and everything on the surface. He would not lose to a human. He would not. Far below, Mira received word of the flagship's weapons powering up. She smiled and turned to the old Vrethki leader. "Is it ready?" she asked. The old engineer nodded, his blind eye seeming to gleam with satisfaction. "The shuttle is repaired and hidden. The old identification codes are loaded. The virus is prepared." He paused. "This is a suicide mission, you know. Even if you reach the flagship, you will be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Mira climbed onto Ghost's back and looked up at the stars. "I died 20 hours ago," she said. "Everything since then has been borrowed time. Time to pay it back." She rode toward the hidden shuttle, her army falling in behind her. The endgame had begun. The shuttle rose from the planet's surface in the middle of the chaos. It was an old Zyrathi assault craft. built 300 years ago and abandoned in the same bunker where Mira had found the Corvith. The Vrithki had spent hours repairing its engines and weapons. More importantly, they had restored its original identification codes. Modern Xyrathi security systems did not recognize technology that old. To them, the shuttle was invisible. Just another piece of debris floating in the void. Mira sat in the pilot's seat, her hands steady on the controls. Behind her, Ghost crouched in the cargo hold along with 12 warriors and the old Vrethki engineer who had refused to stay behind. They were all that could fit in the small ship. 20 beings against a flagship crew of thousands. It would have to be enough. The throne of ashes hung in low orbit above Virath 9. It was even more massive up close, a mountain of black metal bristling with weapons. Lights glowed from countless windows, and smaller ships moved around it like insects around a hive. This was the heart of Xyrathi power in the sector, the symbol of their dominance. Mira was going to tear it apart. The shuttle approached the flagship's lower docking bay. Mira held her breath as they passed the first security checkpoint. Nothing happened. The ancient codes worked perfectly. The modern systems saw nothing unusual about a ship that should not exist. They slid through the energy barrier and landed inside the docking bay. "We have maybe 10 minutes before someone notices we're here," Mira said quietly. "Move fast. Stay together. Kill anything that gets in our way." The cargo door opened, and Ghost leaped out into the docking bay. 2 Xyrathi technicians stood nearby, their black eyes going wide with shock at the sight of a Corvith on their ship. Ghost killed them before they could scream. Mira followed, her blade already in her hand. The warriors spread out around her, their massive forms filling the corridor. They moved as a unit, fast and silent, years of training combining with fresh rage. The first real resistance came at the third intersection. A squad of Xyrathi soldiers appeared, weapons raised, shouting orders. The met them head-on. The battle was brutal and brief. Xyrathi bodies hit the floor, and the assault team kept moving. Mira had memorized the flagship's layout from the captured outpost files. She led her team through service corridors and maintenance tunnels, avoiding the main halls where larger forces would be waiting. The ship was huge, but its crew had never expected an internal attack. They were not prepared for enemies who knew where to go and how to get there. Alarms began to wail throughout the ship. Vethkorin's voice echoed through the speakers, ordering all security teams to converge on the intruders. But his orders came too late. Mira's team was already deep inside the ship, moving toward the bridge. They encountered heavier resistance as they climbed toward the command deck. The Xyrathi threw everything they had at the invaders. Soldiers in heavy armor, combat drones with built-in weapons, even some of the ship's own automated defenses. The fell one by one. They died fighting, their massive bodies blocking corridors while Mira and the others pushed forward. Each death bought precious seconds. Each sacrifice brought them closer to the goal. By the time they reached the bridge entrance, only Mira, Ghost, and the old Vrethki remained. The doors to the bridge were sealed and reinforced. Normally, it would take heavy explosives to break through, but the Vrethki had other methods. The old engineer connected a device to the door's control panel and began working. His scaled fingers moved with the speed and precision of someone who had been an expert long before his slavery began. Within seconds, the lock clicked open. Mira looked at the old alien. His body was wounded from the fighting. Blue blood stained his scales, but his eyes were bright with purpose. "Thank you," she said. "Do not thank me yet," he replied. "Finish what we started. Free our people. Make them remember what fear feels like." Mira nodded. Then she pushed through the doors and stepped onto the bridge of the Throne of Ashes. Vethkorin was waiting for her. The commander stood at the center of his bridge, surrounded by his personal guard. 12 of the finest warriors the Xyrathi Dominion had ever produced. They wore ceremonial armor and carried blades that had killed hundreds of enemies each. They were the best of the best. Vethkorin himself held a weapon in each of his 4 hands. His black eyes burned with hatred as he looked at the bloody human girl who had humiliated him. "You should not have come here," he said. "You cannot win this fight. You are outnumbered and outmatched. Surrender now, and I will make your death quick." Mira walked forward slowly. Ghost padded beside her, growling low in its throat. She looked at the 12 guards. She looked at Vethkorin. She looked at the bridge full of officers and crew members who had stopped their work to watch. Then she laughed. It was not a sane laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had been broken and rebuilt into something harder. Someone who had crawled through snow with frozen fingers. Someone who had killed a monster with a metal rod and claimed its pack as her own. Someone who had nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. "I didn't come here to win a fight," Mira said. "I came here to end a war." She attacked. The next 11 minutes were the most violent in the history of the Throne of Ashes. Mira and Ghost moved together as one being. The Corvith's claws tore through armor like paper. Mira's blade found gaps in defense and vital points in anatomy. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like forces of nature, unstoppable and inevitable. The guards fell. One by one, two by two, they fell. Some managed to wound Mira before they died. She ignored the pain. Pain was an old friend by now. It told her she was still alive. When the last guard collapsed, only Vethkoran remained. The commander attacked with the fury of his entire species. His 4 arms moved faster than Mira's eyes could track. His blades cut through the air with deadly precision. He was bigger than her, stronger than her, more experienced than her. But Mira had something he did not. She had already died once. She had come back. And she was not afraid of anything anymore. The battle between them was brutal. Vethkoran's blade cut deep into Mira's side. Her weapon slashed across his chest. They traded wounds like old friends, exchanging stories. Blood sprayed across the bridge floor, red and gray mixing together. In the end, it came down to will. Vethkoran was tired. He had ruled through strength for decades, but he had never faced someone like this. Someone who refused to fall no matter how many times she was hit. Someone who kept coming no matter how much she bled. He made a mistake. A small one. His guard dropped for just a moment. Mira did not waste the opening. Her blade went through his throat and out the back of his neck. Vethkoran's black eyes went wide with shock. His weapons fell from his hands. He reached up to touch the blade, as if he could not believe what had happened. Mira leaned close to his face. "Humans are nothing," she whispered. "You were right. We are nothing. We have nothing. We lose everything. And that makes us the most dangerous things in the universe." She pulled her blade free, and Vethkoran, commander of the Zyrathi Dominion, fell dead at her feet. Mira stood alone on the bridge of the enemy flagship. Around her, officers and crew members stared in frozen horror. None of them moved. None of them dared. She walked to the main communication console and activated the fleet-wide channel. Every ship, every outpost, every soldier in the Dominion would hear what she said next. "My name is Mira Okonkwo. 24 hours ago, your commander left me to die on a frozen rock. He thought humans were weak. He thought we were prey." She looked down at his body. He was wrong. "Your commander is dead. Your flagship is mine." She paused, letting the words sink in across 100 ships. "Your army now has a new general." At that moment, the Vrethki virus activated throughout the fleet. Navigation systems locked. Weapons went offline. Engines froze. 147 warships hung helpless in the void, unable to fight or flee. "You have 2 choices," Mira continued. "Surrender and serve, or resist and die. I don't care which you choose. I've been dead once already." Her voice hardened into steel. It didn't take. On the planet below, the surviving Zyrathi soldiers heard the transmission and dropped their weapons. In ships across the fleet, captains looked at each other and made the only logical choice. One by one, they sent their surrenders. 3 days later, the United Nations of Earth received a transmission from beyond the frontier. A young woman stood on the bridge of an alien flagship. Behind her, through the viewport, stretched a captured fleet. Around her stood beings from species humanity had never encountered. All of them armed, all of them loyal, all of them looking at her like she had given them back their souls. "This is General Mira Okonkwo," she said. "I'm bringing some friends home. And I think we need to have a conversation about the rest of the galaxy." In the halls of power across Earth, old leaders who had never known true war watched the transmission. They saw the blood on her armor. They saw the fire in her eyes. They saw the army of monsters and freed slaves standing at her command. And they understood something important. Humanity was not alone anymore. They had never been weak. And the universe was about to learn what happened when you left a human for dead. They came back. They always came back.